Welcome to Beginning, and today it's such an honor and such an important session to do today. In India, we keep talking about the ecosystem. We talk about crypto. We talk about Web3. But to be very honest, we don't talk about Bitcoin much. It was actually uh, my whole dream to actually bring the people who are in US and who are in different part of the world, to call them on my channel and talk about Bitcoin only. There are very few platform in the country who are dedicated to Bitcoin, who are talking specifically for Bitcoin. And it is very important that we talk more about Bitcoin. And in a country like India, we really wanted that the message should go loud and clear. And we want people who really believe in Bitcoin, and who you can call them Bitcoin maximalists, but they take it as an honor. And we wanted to do this session with all the Bitcoin maximalists. This is an exclusive series that we have been doing, and we wanted to start with Jeff Booth. And it's such an honor to see Jeff Booth on our channel. Thank you very much, Jeff, for accepting this. Jeff, Jeff doesn't need an introduction, but still, if I have to give his introduction, he has been an entrepreneur for the past 20 years. He's been a technology leader. He has been an author of the Price of Tomorrow, and he is also a strategic advisor. And it's been 20 years he's into this technology space, and now he's talking about Bitcoin. He's been advising countries and not just companies. So he's been advising countries on how they can introduce Bitcoin in their ecosystem. But before we start that, in 2016, I remember Goldman Sachs also said that he's one of the 100 most intriguing entrepreneurs in the world. So really an honor. Thank you very much, Jeff. And like, you've been asked this question many times in the past as well, but I just want to ask you that, when you first encountered Bitcoin, what was that moment, and what was your reaction to it? So it was like, were you searching for something like Bitcoin, or were you searching for a solution, or it was just an accident? And what was your reaction?
So during one of my technology companies, we had 375 employees at the time. And when Bitcoin came out, and many of the coders and technologists were talking about Bitcoin early, I was too busy to take it seriously, and so I missed that. I bought my first Bitcoin in 2017, but I only bought a little bit, and I wasn't yet convinced that. Now, I was convinced something was very wrong in the existing financial system, but I couldn't put my finger on exactly what it was. And so that was something I was talking a lot about. And then as I did more in-depth research on both the existing financial system and where it was going to take humanity, and what that was going to mean for my kids, and the new one that was being built alongside it, i.e. Bitcoin, I did a lot of work to be able to understand why Bitcoin is so different than anything else and why it's not repeatable. And that's where then I became more convinced that that Bitcoin was going to be the base layer of a new peer-to-peer internet.
All right. So that's amazing. So Jeff, to begin the conversation, I want to keep this conversation like very organic and very candid. Uh, you must be seeing that the world around Bitcoin, right? The current scenario. We saw, how 3AC fallout. We saw the fallout of the CeFi ecosystem. We saw the fallout of Voyager, and then the FTX. And now we are seeing there is a conflict that we are seeing between Gemini and Genesis, and Grayscale and DCG. All these scenario that is happening, and the things that we are seeing in the CeFi ecosystem, the collapse of CeFi ecosystem, how it has impacted Bitcoin, and what is your opinion on this? That whatever is happening right now in the CeFi or in the crypto ecosystem right now.
This is going to be hard to hear, and for some of your listeners, and they're going to want to push back, just because they're invested in that ecosystem. but that entire ecosystem is going to go to zero, and the entire thing. And you're going to rebuild on top of Bitcoin. Now, I'm gonna walk you through the why, and why it looked like this, and why I predicted it would look like this. And you can read some of my articles on predicting what would happen in this. In fact, one specific, just you might want to put in the show notes, is finding signal in a noisy world.
Yeah.
Because it walks through a lot of what I'll talk about next, and why it was easy to predict what would happen just because of human nature. So let's start with the existing ecosystem that we live in, the existing World Trade Organization, the base layer of commerce all over the world, which is 10,000 times bigger than Bitcoin. It's 4 orders of magnitude bigger than Bitcoin. And so in that system requires inflation to survive. And why does it require inflation to survive? It requires inflation to survive because technology is deflationary. Technology should be saving our time as we remove labor with technology and make things better. And the natural flow in energy and everything should bring prices down. Yet it's actually probably a lot bigger number than this because of derivatives and everything else. But let's just call it $400 trillion of debt in the world, of global debt. That if prices fall, the debt rises in real terms and can't be paid back. And so that debt is already insolvent. And the only way you can pay it back is manipulate the money to be able to pretend you can pay it back in real terms. Now, that's an important concept because it's not being repaid back in nominal terms. It's not being paid back in real terms. It's being paid back in nominal terms, which means your money is losing money. There is theft in money, and you don't vote for that theft when you have elections in India or Canada or the U.S. Nobody tells you. They talk about taxes, but they don't talk about, I'm going to hide most of my revenue in theft that steals from part of my population and transfers to another. And so what that does is, because inflation is wage deflation, right? It's the same thing. It's just the other side of the coin. So in other words, to try to keep up with technology advancing, we're going to pay people less and less and less. And they're going to rise up because they can't pay for their housing or food or anything else. We're going to transfer that wealth through inflation to people who already have all the money, because they have all the assets. And we're going to do that to save a system that's unsavable because it requires theft and money. Now, in that system, you have to ask yourself. Now, the bigger question is, what would the emergent complex behavior, because all society is us trading, us doing this, what would the emergent complex behavior of all society look like if it was based on theft? And what you can see is a mirror reflection all over the world of that behavior. And it's getting worse and worse. Who would win? It would be the people that would be best at deceiving you. Where would you read your information? From that same information. You would see it everywhere, because ultimately all money is information. And to push on that a little bit for people that are listening to this podcast, because they'll push back on it because they haven't heard that before. But you realize you don't want more money. You want more of the carrying capacity of what money is in your terms. You want more of what you believe money buys you. Sometimes that could be, my kids can go to nice schools and they can get out of abject poverty. Sometimes it could be hope for your family. Sometimes it could be, I could move to a new country. Sometimes it could be travel. But you don't actually care about the money itself, because if you cared about the money itself, that would mean the information itself. Then what that would mean is a Venezuelan bolivar would be equal to a US dollar. Right? All it is a piece of paper describing what you really want, right? Or a digital entry describing what you really want. So obviously, if you had misinformation and money, by manipulating money, and that manipulation had to rise exponentially to pay debt that couldn't be paid back,
Hmm.
then the entire world would be looking through that misinformation,
Hmm.
and everybody would think they had the right answer. And you could argue even what we're doing on this podcast. You could argue, okay, well, maybe Jeff's got a part of that misinformation as well, and you'd have to do your own research to see if that's true. But in the existing system, that's what it would look like, and everything you would read, everything, and what would happen is technology would amplify the misinformation because it's based on misinformation, and technology all over the world would amplify it. As you did more and more technology, the people who controlled the technology would have more power to be able to amplify potentially bad messages. That fair to start with?
Yeah,
Okay.
absolutely. And uh, I just wonder, after listening to you, is since childhood, while I was in school, and in all the schools in India specifically, you know you're always taught in the school that inflation is good, and inflation is important, inflation is necessary. And whenever we spoke about deflation, they said deflation is villain. It is really bad for the economy, and the economies will countries can if deflation persists for a longer period, countries will die. We will vanish. So
So
why
yeah.
we were always told that inflation is hero and deflation is villain?
So just ask yourself, like, so to get to first principles, to get to the root of any problem, you typically ask why 5 times. So your top why, I've been told inflation is bad, or sorry, deflation is bad and inflation is good.
Yeah.
So it deserves asking why, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
What would be the answer to why?
The answer to why, if you ask them why, they'll say, see, if there is no money, if there is no inflation, people, your salaries won't increase, because the if
Okay, perfect.
productivity.
Okay,
Yeah.
yeah, perfect. So then in that, so what you're saying in that, because inflation is theft, right? Nobody votes for it. It is actually
Mm.
theft in money. It's misinformation and money. What you're saying is, to have a productive economy, you have to have theft in money. So, and then somebody might say to your next question, well, that's the only way to build an economy. Well, why? Right? If technology is reducing prices, and the free market, us trading, should reduce prices, then anything that stops that must, as a result, concentrate wealth in few hands. So it must make part of the population a lot poorer as they work harder and harder to try to keep up. And it must make part of the population a lot richer, a political class a lot richer. And then the poorer part of that population would go to the richer people and say, can you help me? Right? And they would get more power because they could say, oh, I'm doing it to save those poor people, when it's actually theft and money. Now I understand, and this is where I want to be careful. Deflation from a debt-based system, when the entire system is based on debt, is bad, because the debt can't be repaid and it collapses. So people are conflating what a productive economy looks like versus what a debt-based system looks like. And we're in a debt-based system, and we are all in it. So the world is inside this debt-based system, and they're unable to see from that system what a new system could look like.
Yeah, absolutely.
And they're tinkering around the edges of a debt-based system, making that debt-based system worse, because it's already insolvent. The debt is already insolvent. There's no possible way. And here's a really good example, because there are lots of people in India. I built and sold a company in India, and so I familiar, love the people, really great people, and so, but a lot of people stuck in that system won't see that. They're trying to escape. All they're trying to get is enough money to live, and that money, and they're being forced to put that money risk that money because if they just held the money loses value.
Yeah.
So you have a system problem that people believe that system problem that everybody's racing in, and as they're racing into that system, changing leaders, doing trying to make more money from that system, gambling from that system to try to get enough money to get out of that system for their family, you're making the system stronger. Because what happens when, and you could take a whole bunch of the collapses, 2008 would be a good example, right? What happens if that system is going to collapse and everybody is going to sit in that system? Then every bank would fail. So we detach what I'm talking about right now. We detach ourselves from reality. You could say, yep, yeah, Jeff's right. Technology is deflationary. And that means what ends up happening to prices from technology is prices fall in economics to the marginal cost of production. Right. And the marginal cost of production of artificial intelligence or your calculator app is zero. And why your calculator app on your phone is free is because the marginal cost of production is zero. So entrepreneurs race into that, and while they can make a penny, they create lots of different apps, competing. But then it falls to zero, and no more entrepreneurs want to create the next calculator app because it's already free. And inside what I just said, and so if technology is moving that fast and trying to make everything in our lives free at that rate, then what that means is the debt has to expand at the exact mirror image of that rate, or the manipulation of money has to expand at that rate to pretend to keep the debt solvent because it's insolvent already. And so, but if you're inside that system, measuring everything from that system, you're unlikely to see what I'm talking about. And even if you see what I'm talking about, what ends up happening is people it's too big a problem for them to deal with, right? So they go back to, okay, what do I do? So I don't know what to do, and they're fear paralyzed. And then you see things like OpenAI, ChatGPT, and everything exploding. And if you just predict that forward, if you just predict where that's coming, and the merge of machines and merge of robotics and AI, and you understand that AI is going to do most things better than us.
Absolutely.
Then if you steal that productivity gain from flowing to society in the form of lower prices, and you transfer it to very few people, what you're also saying is, I'm going to be in slavery forever, modern day slavery forever, because the job shouldn't even need to be here. And as the job goes away, I'm just going to get less and less money, but think I'm making more because the money, what you said, my wage goes up. It doesn't go up in real terms.
Absolutely.
It goes down in real terms. And so it's a trick that people think they're getting richer and they're getting poorer. And that's why, and that trick is at the center of all of the conflict that you're seeing in the world starting to rise up, because people are starting to wonder. And what ends up happening too, with why you'll probably, when you went to school, you probably heard 2% inflation rate.
Yeah, 2%. Yeah.
Yep. Just change that term to 2% theft. Right? Just change that term. We require 2% theft in money, and
Certainly believe that.
And what that. But remember, it compounds every year, so it's not just 1 year. It compounds every year. So, but it is required in a debt-based economy, because otherwise the debt fails, and that is the economy. So, but let's insert 2% theft, and why 2% is really as simple as this. If you walked into your house and 2% of your things were gone, you wouldn't notice it. You'd put up with it. And the next year, if another 2% of it, you probably wouldn't notice it. Yeah. But that 2% has to turn into 5%, then 10%, then 15%, then it has to turn into hyperinflation. And
that's exactly what's happening.
Exactly. And what destroys society is then you walk into your house, you think everything's good, you think you're looking backwards, you think you're going back to the old world, and it's getting worse and worse. And then you walk into your house and 10% of your stuff is gone, and you start to notice. And you can't take the trip that you took last year, or you can't take you're having trouble feeding your family or paying for your energy, and you start to notice. And that's what's happening to the world. And why that's really important concept to understand is most people haven't done the work at the plumbing level of a system. I have, the plumbing level of the system that gives them their life. Right? The emergent complex behavior of society is based on that plumbing, which has a defect in it. And that defect is moving against technology, and they're exactly the opposite forces. One driving to a dystopian future. If you keep inflating against the technology is neutral, but it would bring abundance if you stop deflate against it. But the problem is, the system itself can't allow deflation because it's based on a debt-based system. But because we live on top of the plumbing, and we buy a house, and the house goes up in value. It doesn't go up in value. The dollars go down in value. But we think the house goes up in value because the dollars go down in value. Right, and so we gain, and then if somebody owns, instead of one house, they own 50 houses, they gain more, because remember, the wage deflation, or inflation or wage deflation, the person that doesn't own the house, their dollars are being eroded, and they're paying more in rent, and they're paying more, and so that's how that system is designed. But sitting on top of that system, and we're interacting on top of that system, we wouldn't see it because we don't understand the plumbing. Now, if we take that concept, because that's a really important concept to get first, if we take that concept and then we introduce Bitcoin, then what would the world look like from that system? So you have a system that's 10,000 times bigger than Bitcoin, right? And then Bitcoin is decentralized and secure at the base layer. And we'll go into a little bit deeper on this, but decentralized and secure, meaning that no power in this system, no matter how big it is, no matter how much money you can have, no matter what, can stop Bitcoin.
Yeah.
It can try, it can misrepresent, it can say energy use is bad for the planet, which is totally the opposite of what it is, what's true in Bitcoin. It can try all of these attack vectors. China can try to shut it off. Countries can try to regulate it, but nothing can stop it. It keeps on advancing and advancing and advancing, and it becomes more decentralized and secure over and over. Every year, more decentralized, more secure, as more and more people understand. And inside that more and more people understanding, Bitcoin rises in price exponentially. And it rises to where it is now, call it 16,000 US, 17,000 US, but it's very volatile on the way up and down. Now, in that system, that you have this manipulated system, and you have a new system free from manipulation that just keeps on rising, that's outside of the system and unimpeachable from the existing system that we live in, but created a whole bunch of wealth in Bitcoin. Now, what would happen in that system? Because in Bitcoin, most people wouldn't understand this on your podcast, and I'd encourage them to read that post I talked about, finding signal in a noisy world, to get there and start the research. But it's called the blockchain trilemma.
Yeah. And
you can only solve two of three, the design elements of a blockchain. You can only solve two of three sides of a blockchain. And the three sides are decentralization, security, and scalability. So to protect Bitcoin and make it decentralized and secure, Bitcoin made design choices, or Satoshi Nakamoto made design choices that prevented scalability. So it could only do Bitcoin itself could only do 5 to 7 transactions on the main layer, because it chose the two of three it chose is decentralization and security, and it gave up scalability.
Yeah.
So now what would the natural market reaction? So you have open source technology that anybody could just cut over a Bitcoin instance. And you have a global market competing, and a global market that sees Bitcoin is growing this fast and has this much value, but you can't build anything on top of it. Nothing can be built on top of it. It's and you can't transact in it because it only does 5 to 7 transactions a second. What would the world that's being manipulated in the existing system, that sees a whole bunch of early people into Bitcoin that got rich, get out of the existing system? What would happen in that world where that technology, at least in the first instance of that technology, wasn't scalable? And what you would see is just let's go through the use cases first. So if you cut over a new version of Bitcoin, if you just took the code like Dogecoin and cut over a new version of Bitcoin, which anybody could do, you could convince a whole bunch of new people that says this is a better coin than this is the new Bitcoin. Start from zero and it's going to go. But what value would a chain have that is a later copy, a later copy of the existing chain? And so it has the exact same utility as the existing chain, Bitcoin, but it's a later copy with less decentralization, less security. So you could just go through you could go through kind of a system, and you could say that'll go to zero, because the one with more decentralization and more security will attract more users over time, and that one will eventually go to zero. So that's one type of use case, and that would be the type of use cases that just took Bitcoin's code and created new coin with less security and less decentralization. So you can see Bitcoin wins against that. How about if I choose, if in my elements I choose, I could say Bitcoin's old tech, and I could say I'm going to design for scalability, but I have to choose one of the other two. So I have to choose to either leave security, right, and keep and be decentralized. So I choose decentralization and scalability, and I lack security. You could pretty well see all of those go to zero because they get hacked, vectors, people lose their coins. So that's an edge case that people would, and I think they see them, like these Solana hacks and different hacks, and these things keep going to zero. Now the original investors in this have an incentive to tell you they're better, right? And all the people that are bag holders in that have an incentive to tell you that they're better for some reason. And what I would encourage people is, if you are not technology proficient, then and you're one trusting somebody else, then you need more than somebody just telling you that they're better. Why I wrote that research piece is so people could try to poke holes in it to see to make their own decisions. Okay, so now we've dealt with I chose scalability and decentralization. Now let's take the other one, because that's dominant for a whole bunch of what maybe people in India and such believe, and that would
because I just want to add on to that, because because in India you must have seen and you must have heard that Polygon is from India. So a lot of people and a lot of developer fraternities in India. So I want to ask you this question, that many people believe that since you cannot build deploy smart contracts on Bitcoin, you cannot build NFTs, you cannot make metaverses, you cannot make the Bitcoin layer one as programmable, then so Bitcoin is old fashioned and it's old technology. The new way of looking at this industry is through smart contracts, through programmability, through decentralized applications. So that is not happening on Bitcoin, it's happening on other chain. So the future is like the new thing that is there. What is your point on that, and
Yeah,
where is it?
and that's what I'm going to go at now. So smart contracts in layer one, it's a design choice that increase the amount of space in the block size, which is a byproduct of increasing the amount of space in the block size, make it prohibitively expensive for nodes to check the block size.
Hmm.
And so what that means is the cost exponentially increases, and very few people can run the node of the entire blockchain.
Right.
Right. And so that is one of the design choices in layer one that allows scalability and a whole bunch of other use cases that ensures the centralization of the blockchain.
Hmm.
Because money races to be able, and then the richest people choose the blocks. That's exactly what ends up happening. Well, that's one of them. Now, in that research piece, I go into a couple of others, but that design
Yeah.
choice to solve
If you
scalability.
if you allow me just a sec, if you
Yeah,
allow me, because I have some very important four lines from that research paper. You said the innovations that are the hardest of all to understand are open, decentralized, protocol level technologies. Then you said these protocols create value in the form of a new foundation that emerges slowly and methodically. Protocols are built in layers, which means we can't generally see what is possible on the next layer until it is already built.
yeah,
These four lines are very important, and that's what I want to understand from you, from your perspective, that why people are not, why people are in hurry. It seems that people are in hurry. They want to see innovations happening every day, but if you want to build a long strong structure over time, that takes time, and especially the protocols, they grow in layers.
yeah,
So what is your take on that?
yeah. No, and that's why I wrote the piece. But the first part is that first layer of the protocol. If it is centralized, if it becomes centralized
Yeah,
because of a design choice, how could you possibly have decentralized finance on top of a centralized blockchain? Right?
absolutely.
It's an oxymoron. How could you have Web3? Now, remember, a, a database is centralization that costs a lot less. So, who would ever move the information to a blockchain that costs a lot more than use a database? And what you start to understand is you start to understand everything built on top. Now, I don't blame the entrepreneurs that are building on top of this, but once they're building on top of something that's based on quicksand, then the best way to do it is promote that and sell it to somebody else before it collapses.
Yeah.
And so when you see this entire alt chain space, what you see is a whole bunch of that. Some of the entrepreneurs don't know it. Some of the people that are that polygons and so, they might not know what I'm saying here. But ultimately, if the base one layer has to be centralized or is insecure, then everything built on top of it forever will fail, no matter what.
Mm,
And so
absolutely.
you have people investing their life savings in some of these protocols that are designed to fail and spending their time. And I get it, because the existing system we live in is 10,000 times bigger, and they see somebody else that created something that get rich, and all the media talks about somebody getting rich without that fundamental understanding of what it means to be able to be building on that, and they race in. So that's the way market works, and markets work, and they work that way for a long time because people are fooled by the next Ponzi scheme. And what's really important here is if you look at another open source technology stack,
Mm.
what we're using right now is the basic layer of that technology stack, TCP/IP, right?
Yeah.
Developed by DARPA in the 60s. And it wasn't until 1989 that HTTP came out by Tim Berners-Lee that hyperlinked on layer 4 all of the preceding layers together. And even in 1989, if you were, I remember the technology from then. I remember what that looked like. And I remember talking to people, and most people, 99.999% of the world, would have never bet what that same technology stack delivers today,
Yeah.
because they were in the old world. They were in the old system, measuring the new system. And so you couldn't see what was available, what would be built on top of, you couldn't see what was going to be built on the top of the technology stack, even when the technology stack was already there. Right. And
Yeah.
so and so now in layer 1 in Bitcoin, the most important thing, anybody that says Bitcoin's old tech, show me a use case that could withstand the entire financial world and all of the wealth and power that's within it, that's manipulation. Show me a use case anywhere else that could withstand that and get stronger and stronger and stronger. That's what you should build society on. Now, then you talk about layer 2s, and layer 2s bring scalability without sacrificing layer 1, because layer 2 talks to layer 1. And so what you're seeing in Lightning, so you have a network effect. Now remember, the value, a network effect by definition is this: it's like a phone line, right? So if I'm the only one with a phone, it's useless. I add one more person to a phone, it's value for us. One more person, more value for us. One more person, more value for us. And so you can predict specifically the value of a network effect. Every node, every new connection makes that network stronger for all users. So it doesn't get weaker for users, it gets stronger for all users with each new node connection.
Yeah.
So Bitcoin at its base layer, because of what we just talked about, has a network effect on the base layer of money. And it's slowly, what it's actually doing is repricing the existing whole debt stack slowly. Right? Everything is going to move to this new system, and the world is going to be priced in Bitcoin. That's what the first layer is doing. The second layer, Lightning, Liquid, a whole bunch of other open source technologies on top of the first layer, are talking to the first layer without sacrificing scalability or decentralization or security. And now they're adding scalability onto the second layer. And that means you have a network effect on the second layer as well. And that turns into transactions. And if you follow how fast Lightning is growing, and you can send value to anybody in the world for a fraction of a penny, instant settlement, instant final settlement, that is secure, that's outside of the existing system, it's no wonder why it's growing so fast. Because now if a business takes that on, a business used to spend 2.5% or 5% fees to Visa or MasterCard to take a transaction. Now they save that money and they can deliver something to you for cheaper, or you could split what that looks like by using Bitcoin. And the more businesses that do that, and the more people that do that, creates the network effect that's more value for every user that's using it. So it's no wonder it's growing so fast. But it doesn't do it by sacrificing the core in layer 1. It does it by building on layer 2. And the point you said from that piece I wrote is, it's impossible to see the next layer until it's there.
Yeah.
It's impossible. And so I'm fortunate enough. I have an investment fund called Ego Death Capital. I'm fortunate enough to be able to build to be investing in the entrepreneurs that are building the next layers and what's coming. So I get to see, most people are measuring this protocol by looking backwards on what it was, and I get to look forward on what's coming. And so when I see what's coming, it's really exciting on what's coming, and the pivot from entrepreneurs and capital that we're building in this ecosystem that was an error code that would always go to zero, are starting to understand what I'm saying, and they're starting to move back into an ecosystem that produces real long-term value.
Absolutely. So here, what Jeff is trying to say is, I just want to make it simple for the audience, is that, the once there was layer 1 as Bitcoin, nobody could have thought in those early days there could have been a lightning network, say. Nobody could have imagined or could have envisioned that there could have been, you can add velocity to Bitcoin. You can send Bitcoin at a speed of light, right? And it'll be like a direct competition to Visa, Master, and probably better than that. Nobody could have thought about it. And now once you are able to build that layer 1 on top of Bitcoin, now you can see the results. You can see that, okay, uh, things are actually happening. Now the next layer could be, correct me if I'm wrong here. Next layer could be that, tomorrow all these DeFi ecosystem that you are seeing being built on top of other layers or the other blockchains, probably you can see a DeFi ecosystem, or the all that possibilities that you see today, or the all those decentralized applications that you see today could be built tomorrow on top of layer 2, maybe, or
Yeah,
top of layer 1.
that's exactly what'll happen. The it'll gain more and more functionality in layers without sacrificing the layer below it. That's exactly what will happen. And but now just piece on that. So imagine this technology. People are looking at it today, but imagine this technology and what the world would say about this technology 5 years ago, or 6 years ago, or 7 years ago. And when Vitalik talks about Ethereum, there would be a fight with inside this system, and with inside the system that said, there's a whole bunch, well, we can't do anything. There's nothing to do. We just make more money, right? Because this is increasing in value, but there's nothing we can build on. And so there would naturally be a whole fight and a whole bunch of market opportunity to say, well, we can solve that problem better, without the understanding. Because remember, layer 2 didn't exist on Bitcoin at that point.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
right. So from that viewpoint, all of the entrepreneurs trying to build a better Bitcoin just created things that invariably fail because they didn't understand technology scales and layers. That's exactly. And so now you have a whole bunch of people outside confused by that same confusion that a bunch of the entrepreneurs had that were building these.
Absolutely. 100%. And I think you are one of the investor in the one of the startups that is being, using layer 1 on Bitcoin, and probably you're advising couple of startups who are trying to build on top of Lightning, isn't it?
Oh yeah, quite a number. Yeah. So if you look at what Breeze is doing to provide an SDK that allows, because some of the challenges in where what it looked like before, you had to have such technology talent in your team to understand how this all works at the back end. But now this is stable and secure, and now you're having technology teams like Breeze building an software development kit that can implement non-custodial wallets everywhere on top of this system, and it explodes the system. Or you have something like Fedi, which helps solve the custodial problem, and turns into a super app by building almost a layer 3 on top of that. And so these things work together, and they start to drive more and more into the ecosystem, and that ecosystem is growing. We've done diligence on over 350 companies, so it's growing extraordinarily fast. Talent all over the world that is racing into this ecosystem, and so we get to see some of what's coming, and what's coming, it will blow people's minds. It's really exciting.
Amazing. Jeff, coming back to your book, I mean, because your book is something, it's so exciting to just to see this concept that 110% everybody will agree that technology is growing at an exponential pace. Now, when the technology is growing, the prices should have come down, but that's not happening. And once the technology is growing, you will require less people. Tomorrow, like today, for an example, Chat GPT. Why do you need a copywriter today? Why do you need a advisor? Like maybe once the artificial intelligence improves, once all these the tech stacks improve, the more and more jobs will be taken by over by artificial intelligence. And once people will lose job, how governments are going to handle this situation? By probably doing more universal basic income. Probably they'll be funding people with money, free money, and probably they'll be printing more. That is the only solution that is available right now. In your book you have tried to give solution, but you were, in your book also you were saying that all these four solutions, the government might not like those solutions. And then in somewhere you've talked about bitcoin as a solution, maybe,
Yeah.
right? In your book you've spoken about that. Now we see that the governments are scared of bitcoin at this point of time, even if they understand it's the power of decentralization, even if they understand that they cannot stop it, still they are not willing to accept it. What is that point you think? Because in your book you've also said that probably we might have to go for a great reset. We
No,
have to maybe, you know
yeah,
so
and so I don't talk about the Great Reset, and that's more of a WEF thing, and out of the existing system, if you controlled all the wealth in the existing system, if you were on top, what would you want? You would want a Great Reset where you keep
yeah.
all your wealth, right? And everybody else, that's what 2008 was, right?
Yeah.
Everybody, all the bankers kept their jobs, kept their bonuses, everything else, and they essentially stole from the population to do so. And so that's not capitalism. That's not what capitalism looks like. So capitalism, free trade between people, means if you take a bet and you're wrong, you lose.
Hmm.
If you take a bet and you're wrong and you're allowed to steal money from somebody else to make you whole, that doesn't look like a world I want to live in.
Yeah.
But that is the world we live in. And it actually is far more perverse than people realize. That is the world we live in. And that's the existing system. And there is no way out of the existing system. Now you could say whatever you want. Let's just use the kind of WEF mantra, and let's use what you're saying. You could, if I knew technology was deflationary and it was
Mhm.
moving exponentially, and my solution to do that is let prices fall so humanity in general gains, right? We all share the abundance, and prices wouldn't fall to zero. They would just keep falling, and we would all work less. And if you created value, you would create more value for yourself than somebody else, and the entire world would just constantly reduce prices. And instead of pretending your wages are going up when they're actually going down in real terms, what in the new system would look like is they would actually be going up.
Mhm.
You'd get less. You might get less wages the next year, but they would buy more, and that would continue to happen forever. So it would be in a complete inverse of the existing system we live in today, and it would be a rise in prosperity for middle class, poor, wealthy. But so that's my view of the world. But let's just say at the top level, two different people at the exact same time realized how fast technology was moving and how it
Mhm.
was going to remove eventually most, or if not all, labor. A different view of the world could be this: we have to manipulate money faster so we can protect the stupid people, right? That we hurt from the manipulation of the money in the beginning, that we benefit from, right? That we're going to protect all those stupid people by giving them more money and benefit us more. You could actually make that argument, and you could say, what will all those people do without work? And you could keep driving prices up, and the money that you took from them, you could give them back a little bit to keep them complacent.
Yeah.
That's what the existing system looks like. And so no matter what, technology is moving at this rate, right? No matter what, it's going to keep moving. So the only difference is, do you centralize all power over you through that technology, or do you decentralize it and let it flow, the abundance flow to you? That's the difference.
Mhm.
Now, That's why if you come back to Bitcoin, why it's so critical, because it had to withstand that power to be able to continue. It had to drive that. And so now where the world goes on that centralization, we all know that our ideas form the world we live in, right? We create value, and when we create value, so everybody that's using some technology, let's use this live stream or this stream, for instance. 20 years ago, we couldn't have done this, and it couldn't have touched millions of people. You would have had to spend a whole bunch of money to bring me to India.
Yeah.
Other people would have to spend a ton of money to be able to come into a concert hall or a hall where we could only impact a small number of people.
Yeah.
And now this one podcast, maybe it hits 10,000 people, maybe it hits 100,000, maybe it hits millions. This one podcast can change, can get people to understand millions, and it costs us nothing. It costs us our time. So when you see that we use the technology that makes our lives better, and we create technology, and the only things that win are the things in the free market that make our lives better, right? It's hard to imagine. We see ourselves as two different parts of the same equation, right? If we see ourselves in one world as a seller and a house owner, and all in that world, we want all prices to go up. We want our wages to go up forever. But in the other world, which is exactly the same person, we want all prices to come down. So how could we vote with all our time to get more value and concurrently believe we should live in a system where we get less value, right? Same person. And so that's where you see that defect, but you can see how it's so confusing for people, and why they get trapped in it. And I want to say, abundance in money creates scarcity everywhere.
Yeah.
Scarcity in money creates abundance everywhere.
Creates abundance. Yeah.
It creates abundance. And if abundance in money didn't create scarcity, then you'd think in 5,000 years of human history that somebody would have figured out, oh, if I just make up more monetary units, make up more paper, I solve the world's problems.
Yeah.
And so what you can see is that construct, and what you can see it all around you. The air you breathe is abundant. That's why it's free. And technology creates abundance everywhere. If we let it to create abundance everywhere, it creates that abundance, and prices fall as a result. We live in an unnatural world that relies on manipulation of us to be anything opposite of what I just said.
Yeah, absolutely, Jeff. Thank you very much for these wonderful thoughts. I think this the start to this series has been like really amazing. We got so much information and so much deep thoughts that could have only come from you. To be very honest, I think very deep insights. Just wanted to since it's been like towards the end of the discussion, what do you see? What will be that point, when we'll see Bitcoin getting mass adoption by nations? They start to believe in it, or they say, okay, let's start putting it into our reserve maybe, and then probably we'll think about it, adopting it completely in future. What will be that point in time, or what will be those series of events that will happen when you think that these things will start to happen? Because your visit to Madeira, your recent visit to Madeira, even I'm interested in knowing what was his apprehensions, or what was his thought process towards Bitcoin. What was your experience once you discussed it?
So once people understand what we've talked about on this podcast, they typically do a bunch more work to say, is that true? Is everything that I just said true? And once they get to everything that I just said is true, then they start to say, then they start to understand it, and then they start to spend more of their time in it. And as they spend more of their time in it, they see, it's effectively what ends up happening is their minds change from a world that's based on increasing chaos
Hmm.
to a world that's based on truth, hope, and abundance. And as you move between systems from one system and you start to spend more of your time in the new system, you see a whole bunch of those people building the future, and you see a world full of hope. And so sometimes that happens right away. Sometimes it takes a while for people to get there. But I just, when I think about it, I think how hard this is to understand, because we grew up in a different system, and we're measuring a new system from the existing system. In fact, I think inside your question, your question probably says, for a lot of people, is, when is Bitcoin going to go up in price? And if you realize actually what's happening is if you're actually saying that, what you're doing is measuring Bitcoin from your existing fiat currency that's being manipulated. And what's happening in Bitcoin is it's not going up in price. All prices are falling against it forever.
Yeah.
And so but that's a construct that we're not used to. And so if you believe that that's going to happen, and you believe that that governments are going to do that eventually, then the question isn't when governments are going to do it, is how much can I acquire before they do? Right? How much can I do before? Because you're front running all of them. Because all a government is us. We vote for any government. They either stay in power or they get toppled by us. And why this is important is it's not them controlling us. We think that's true, but we have the choice. All we have to do is stand up, walk across to Bitcoin, and more people, as they build this bridge to the other side, as more and more people do, then it's a forcing function that's the new world we live in. And that's getting better and better. That's why it's a move towards truth, hope, and a brighter future, truth, hope, and abundance. And we all have a choice, and there's nothing governments can do to stop it, because government is us. But will we stay in the existing system of government and say, what are they doing? Those people, those bad people. And we spend all our time making that system stronger, marching against governments, breaking windows, you see revolts all over the place, which when then the government just comes in, or a new face on a different government comes in and manipulates more money to fix the windows, right? and do it at a greater rate. When all you have to do, if the people standing up all over the world against their governments just started to buy Bitcoin, it'd be over relatively quickly, and we'd be moving faster. So the question isn't when governments are going to do it. The question is when each person is going to use their given power of their control to stand up and say, I'm choosing.
Thank you very much, Jeff, for all these thoughts. Last thought. I mean, I want to take your last thought on the World Bank has recently predicted that the growth to be 1.7%, and the world is getting into recession. They have projected that US might grow by only 0.5%. If you can just tell us, is the worst over or worst is yet to come? What is your thought on the macro side of the things?
Worst is yet to come. The worst is yet to come. Now, because people don't understand the plumbing. Remember, the $400 trillion of debt is insolvent. You can only make it solvent by manipulating money. So if the Fed continues to tighten, what ends up happening now remember when the Fed said, this is not that long ago, like it's 2020, that there will be no inflation from all of this monetary stimulus, right? There will be no inflation. Then 6 months later, or 12 months later, that's going to be marginal inflation. Or transitory inflation, and then high inflation. It's because the lag time of effects that a government's doing, it's like they're driving 90 miles an hour backwards with their eyes closed, looking out the rearview mirror, and whipping from side to side. It's getting worse and worse. But the lag time for that impact to reach the economy takes time to roll through. So it's like an 18-month lag time. So the US dollar only contracted, or the US Fed only contracted their money supply by 2.7% last year. And it only started in September. So try 18 months from that point. And what ends up happening is things start to roll over. Things start to the debt is insolvent. It can't be paid. And if the interest rates go up on the debt, then, and it couldn't be paid before, now it really can't be paid.
Yeah.
And it starts to roll over. And all of those people that are having higher and higher energy prices, food prices all over the world, they start to default on their debt. And as it spins and it cascades and it gets faster and faster. So what is coming to the global economy? I can't predict when, but it is going to be ugly. It is going to be messy. Bitcoin is your life raft in that storm. And I would I would encourage people to get some insurance in Bitcoin in a cold wallet, and understand how to hold that securely.
Thank you very much for this lovely message, Jeff. I want to really thank you, from the bottom of my heart, and I want to close this session by one of Jeff's favorite quote, and that I want to read out here. Jeff's favorite quote is, "Watch your thoughts; they become your words. Watch your words; they become your actions. Watch your actions; they become your habits. Watch your habits; they become your character. Watch your character; it becomes your destiny." So this is fascinating. This is fantastic. Thank you very much, Jeff. I'll be requiring your help, probably to network with more, Bitcoin maximalists, and so that I can bring them over to the channel and the message comes out loud and clear for Bitcoin. I want to make more content on Bitcoin so that people, get knowledge about it and they get a lot of, doubt. Lot of their doubt gets cleared through this session. I'll be requiring your help.
Anytime. Pleasure.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Jeff. Thank you.